I didn't sleep the next day. Not really, just lay on the mattress in my apartment with the blinds drawn and the air conditioner rattling like it was holding its breath, replaying the moment over and over. The figure outside, my own face on, the other side of the glass, the bell chiming without the door moving, and the way my hand had closed around the key before I'd even realized I'd reached for it. I kept asking myself the same question, like if I said it enough, I'd find the logic hidden somewhere. Why would something look like me? And why did someone write it down before I ever started this job? By 6 in the evening, I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, splashing cold water on my face, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But my reflection wouldn't meet my eyes, and for one terrible second, I thought I saw it breathe out of sync with me. By 9, I was back in the car, headlights cutting through the long stretch of 2-lane highway, windows down for air that smelled like damp dirt and gasoline, thinking I'd quit if anything weird happened tonight, thinking I wouldn't come back if I could just make it through one more shift alive and paid. But when I pulled into the sundown mart lot, Marcy's old silver Corolla was parked out front, even though she wasn't supposed to be here after 11, and she was sitting in the driver's seat with the window down, smoking one of those harsh menthols that smell like cold medicine and pine needles. When I stepped out, she didn't greet me, didn't even look at me, just blew smoke into the humid air and said, "You checked the cameras after I left, didn't you?" I froze halfway between the car and the door, the crickets out in the dead field behind the store going silent for no reason I could hear, and I said carefully, "Why would you ask me that?" And she finally looked at me, her eyes sharp in the fading blue light, and said, "Because you've got that look, the one everyone gets after the first time, that kind of pale where the inside of your wrists show through." I swallowed hard, my voice smaller than I wanted. "The first time what?" She ground the cigarette into an old Snapple bottle lid, capped it, tossed it in the passenger seat, and leaned back with her hand on the steering wheel like she was weighing something she'd promised not to say. Finally, she exhaled through her nose and said, "Booth saw his double 2 nights before he disappeared, didn't listen. Thought the first rule was a joke. It isn't. If you want to stay breathing, don't open that door for anyone, not even me if you see me twice." I blinked at her, my mouth dry. But before I could ask, she added quickly, "I don't have time to explain it tonight. Just follow the rules." Then she finally nodded toward the door and said, "Shift's yours." She drove off without waiting for an answer, taillights cutting through the darkness, until they vanished behind the curve of the highway, leaving me standing, alone under the buzzing neon, holding the key with sweaty fingers. Inside, the store smelled the same as the night before, stale coffee and warm plastic, but I couldn't shake the sense that something had rearranged itself, like a chair half an inch off from where you left it. Nothing obvious enough to accuse, but different enough to make your stomach uneasy. I walked to the counter, set my bag down, opened the rulebook again just to be sure the words hadn't changed, and rule number 1 stared back at me in the same calm black ink, ordinary and terrifying at the same time. "Don't open the door for someone who looks like you." Midnight crept in quiet. The highway felt emptier than last night, no truckers, no late-night drifters, just static shadows under the parking lot lamps, and I caught myself checking the camera grid every 30 seconds even though nothing moved. At 12:37, the glass in front of me made a sound, sharp and fast like fingernails dragged hard against a chalkboard, and I flinched so hard my knee knocked the drawer under the register. The sound came again, deliberate this time. A long, thin screech across the bottom of the glass door, and I grabbed the flashlight under the counter, clicked it on, and shined it at the glass. But there was nothing there. No person, no animal, just the smooth reflection of the inside lights on the outside sheen. When I crouched low to check the base of the door, though, I saw them. 3 long scratches etched into the glass like something sharp and deliberate had dragged across it. The surface chipped in pale streaks where the marks cut deep enough to catch the light. I ran my thumb over one of them, rough and shallow but real, and my stomach flipped because I hadn't locked up yet, and the scratches were inside the store, curving upward, like whatever made them had been trying to get out. The bell above the door chimed suddenly, a single soft ding that made me whip around, but the door didn't move. The lock was steady, and when I checked the cameras, the feed glitched for less than half a second, long enough for the frames to smear into static and resolve again. Everything looked normal. The pump's empty, the lot blank. But on the front door camera, the scratches weren't there, like the system refused to acknowledge what I'd seen with my own eyes. The phone behind me buzzed once, then fell silent, and when I reached for it without thinking, I caught the time on the register clock, 3:14 a.m., and yanked my hand back like I'd touched a hot burner. The rule about the phone wasn't until 3:15, but my ears started ringing anyway. A high, thin sound like feedback, and I heard my own voice in my head muttering the words I hadn't meant to say out loud. "Why are the scratches inside?" Sound answered me, faint and wrong, from the back stockroom. A low 3-tap rhythm on metal like knuckles against a locker. Tap, tap, tap. My whole body went cold, the panic in my chest sitting on top of something heavier, something curious despite the terror. I walked toward the stockroom door, flashlight shaking in my hand, telling myself it was nothing. Some loose vent cover, an old soda can falling, something small enough to keep me sane. But when I pushed the door open, the air inside was damp and colder than the front of the store, like the temperature dropped 10 degrees between one tile and the next. The light switch flicked and hummed, flickered once, stayed dark, and the flashlight beam sliced over stacked cases of soda and detergent, metal racks heavy with snack boxes. The storage freezer door latched tight. Another sound came. Softer, now like breath pulled between teeth, and I whispered before I realized I'd spoken. "Booth?" And something across the room answered in a whisper that wasn't quite a word, just the shape of one, like someone trying to remember how to speak. I backed up slowly, one foot dragging behind the other, and as I hit the hallway threshold, I heard the bell over the door at the front of the store chime twice, too fast, too sharp, like the timing didn't belong to a human hand. I turned, heart pounding, flashlight beam jittering against the wall, and from where I stood I could see the reflection of the door in the convex security mirror above the lottery counter. The glass was empty, no one outside, but the monitor. Feed disagreed. On the live door camera, someone stood pressed close to the glass, forehead touching it, palms flat, face angled away so I couldn't see the eyes. And the thing that rooted me to the floor wasn't the presence. It was the shirt. Same wash denim, same green jacket, same dark hair hanging forward in tired strands. The me from last night back again, or maybe never gone? I grabbed the intercom phone, pressed the button, my voice dry and shaking. "Who are you?" And the figure's head turned slightly toward the lens, slow and mechanical, like testing a range of motion. And then the feed cut out into static. For 3 beats before snapping back, empty again. No one at the door. Scratches invisible on the glass. Parking lot quiet. I dropped the handset like it burned, stumbled behind the counter, and forced myself to breathe through the rising urge to bolt for the highway barefoot and screaming. But before I could calm my hands, the store's lights dimmed to half strength, and the soda cooler compressors died in the same instant, plunging the room into a low mechanical silence so deep I could hear my own heartbeat in my teeth. From the far end of the store, somewhere near the freezer, something knocked again. Tap, tap, tap. I thought of Marcy's face when she said Booth didn't listen, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, and the thought hit me like ice. What if the scratches inside the glass were his? And what if he'd been trying to get out too late? I whispered to the empty store, "Where did you go, Booth?" But the only answer was the faint hum of the camera system cycling, and when the feed jumped again, just a breath of distortion, I saw it. The same door camera frozen mid-frame on an image of myself standing outside the store, smiling slightly with my head tilted, and behind me, in the frozen picture, was someone else just barely visible in the glare, tall and pale and wrong in ways my brain didn't have a name for. The image blinked out, live feed returning clean, and the phone rang once, shrill, piercing, slicing straight through me, and the register clock rolled to 3:15 a.m. The phone rang again, one sharp, shrill burst that cut straight through the silence, the kind of sound that makes your teeth ache. And for a second I just stared at it, like maybe if I didn't move it would stop. But it rang again, longer this time, the register clock glowing 3:16 a.m., 1 minute past the rule I wasn't supposed to test. My hand moved toward the receiver before my brain gave permission, and I stopped inches away, sweat running down my palm, whispering to myself, "Don't answer it, don't answer it." But the curiosity felt alive, crawling in my throat because Who the hell calls a roadside gas station at 3:16 in the morning anyway? And when I glanced at the display, my stomach dropped. The tiny cracked ID screen showed J. Rowe in green letters, my own name, my number, the one saved only in my phone. The ringing stopped mid-burst and I exhaled hard, laughing once without meaning to. And then the speaker at the bottom of the handset hissed softly, faint static leaking like breath into the quiet, and a voice, my voice, came through, calm and low. "Why did you touch the glass?" My grip locked so tight my knuckles ached, my own recorded tone flattening into something mechanical. No stutter, no breath, just clean, perfect cadence. And before I could process what I was hearing, the phone clicked and went dead, leaving the faint hum of the soda cooler compressors slowly returning like nothing had happened. I set the receiver down gently like putting a baby back into a crib, stepping away from the counter, trying to breathe evenly while the rulebook lay open where I'd left it, page glaring up at me with the same warning. Do not answer the phone. After 3:15, but I hadn't technically, and somehow that made it worse. I turned toward the cameras to ground myself, eyes dragging over each frame like a mantra. Door empty, pumps empty, stock aisle empty, until my gaze landed on the corner screen showing the counter from behind, a wide shot capturing me standing, exactly where I stood now. Only in the recording I wasn't standing, I was collapsed behind the counter, sprawled on the floor with one arm bent under me. My shirt darkened around the side of my head like I'd fallen hard and bled. The timestamp in the corner read 3:42 a.m., 26 minutes from now, and my throat locked around a dry swallow as I whispered, "What the hell?" The sound barely audible even to me, and I stepped forward, pressing my face close to the monitor, until I could see the details. The cup knocked over, coffee soaking into receipt paper, the register drawer half open like someone had ripped it out, and in the bottom right corner, blurred but visible, a shape bent low over me, moving out of frame just enough to hide its face, shoulders twitching in short jerks like something eating. I hit the playback toggle instinctively, forgetting Marcy's warning that these weren't saved files, just bleed-throughs, but the feed locked, frozen on the frame of me, unmoving on the floor, a pulse of static rippling faintly along the top, like a heat mirage, and then the monitor jumped. New frame, same camera angle, same timestamp. But now there were two of me behind the counter, one lying still, the other standing above, looking straight into the lens, expression flat and unnatural, mouth slightly open like mid-breath. I stumbled backward so fast I knocked the stool over, the crash loud enough to rattle the chip bags on aisle 1. But the monitor blinked once and went live again, empty behind the counter, me right here where I belonged, chest pounding against ribs like fists on a locked door. I grabbed the intercom phone with a shaking hand, hesitated, then slammed it down again, whispering out loud without meaning to. "Why 3:42? What happens then?" A voice answered, but not from the phone, from the tiny speaker in the ceiling. By the coffee station, a thin, distorted male whisper like air leaking from a split pipe. "Don't be there when it happens." My skin went cold, the flashlight beam trembling in my hand, and I said louder than I meant to, "Who is this? Booth?" But the ceiling speaker hissed once and cut off. I turned toward the stockroom, half expecting to see movement, but the back hallway was still, quiet except for the cooler hum and the faint tick of the wall clock above the microwave, second hand dragging just slightly off beat. A lag in the rhythm like time itself, missed a breath. I stepped behind the counter to check the printed transaction receipt still curling under the register, and froze when I saw the latest one, just printed without any sale input, the paper warm to the touch. A single line centered perfectly in bold black letters, Rule number 3, do not answer the phone after 3:15. My chest tightened as I reached for the rulebook, flipping through it. Rule number 3 had been blank an hour ago, I swear it had, but now the words were there, etched in the same ink as the first rule, as if they'd been there all along and my memory had betrayed me. My hand shook as I traced the letters, testing if they'd smudge, but they didn't. And behind me, the bell above the door chimed softly once, then twice, too fast again. I glanced up at the door camera and froze. Someone was standing outside under the awning, just beyond, the yellow halo of the overhead light. Head tilted forward so their face fell into shadow, hands hanging loose at their sides. The figure stepped forward until the lens caught the jacket, the jeans, the messy brown hair, and it was me again. The same as last night, but different somehow. Smaller movements, slower posture, like a recording playing on lag, and the intercom clicked alive by itself. Soft static opening into the same voice I'd heard on the phone. "You opened the door last time." My throat tightened, and before I could respond, the feed smeared into gray static, image tearing sideways like the signal couldn't hold weight anymore. And the doorbell chimed a third time, louder, sharper. And when I forced my gaze up from the monitor to the real glass at the front of the store, there was no one outside, just the empty stretch of concrete under the light and the faint, distant smear of headlights on the highway. I reached for the panic switch but stopped when a different sound broke through, something low and soft from the back stockroom, like cloth dragging over tile, and I whispered without thinking, "Booth, is that you?" This time, a voice answered, but not like speech, more like static resolving into words at random, syllables cracking. "Don't trust it." I took one step backward and nearly tripped over the stool, catching myself on the counter edge, and then the monitors blinked once and the hallway camera near the stockroom came alive, showing a figure half in frame, crouched low, hair wet and hanging forward, hands on the ground like an animal. And as the flashlight beam from the mounted camera passed across its face, I saw enough to know it wasn't Booth anymore, not really. Its skin was pale and stretched too thin, veins crawling beneath, its jaw too slack like it had forgotten where bone was supposed to hold it. And when it turned toward the lens, its mouth opened wider than it should have. Lips peeled back in, silence, and the hallway camera feed cut to black instantly, replaced by the counter angle again. Me standing there shaking like a leaf, alive for now, but wondering if the thing in the back had crawled out of the same hole my double came from. The phone behind the lottery machine buzzed once more. No ring this time, just a flat electronic chirp, and I turned slowly toward it, heart thudding, forcing my hand forward like dragging it through water until I picked up the receiver without meaning to, lifting it to my ear before I realized I'd broken the rule. And there was no static this time, no distance, just a clear whisper in my exact voice, soft and calm and final. "Jake, you're not supposed to be inside." The blackout didn't last long, maybe 6 seconds, but it was enough to stretch like an hour. And when the overhead lights came back in one long, uneven flicker, I found myself crouched behind the counter, one hand clamped over my mouth, the other gripping the panic switch so hard I felt plastic digging into my palm. But the switch didn't work. Nothing happened. No sirens, no signal, and the faint creak of tiles under weight that wasn't mine was gone now, replaced by the steady hum of the refrigeration units and the soft, almost polite chime of the doorbell, a single ding that froze the blood in my chest. I forced my head up slowly, scanning the door camera feed on the monitors, and at first the glass entrance looked normal again, empty concrete shining under yellow halogen. But then the frame glitched once, tearing horizontally, and for a single, frozen second it showed something pressed against the glass. Long, pale fingers. Too many joints, a distorted reflection of my own face smeared like wet paint, mouth wide in a soundless scream, and before I could process it, the feed corrected itself, showing nothing there, but I was already shaking, every muscle locked. Whispering, "Not real, not real, not real," like saying it enough times would make it true. I stood forcing breath back into my lungs, and that's when the printer behind me activated on its own, head jerking side to side like something was manually forcing the feed, and it spat out a single slip, small, clean, words printed dead, center, Helix node S4, override. My gut clenched cold, the letters meaningless but heavy, like I'd been expected to recognize them, and before I could reach for the paper, the intercom clicked alive, and a low synthetic voice, layered and distorted, came through. "Unit 7 compromised. Preparing correction sequence." My legs locked. Unit 7. That was me. My hands went numb holding the counter, whispering without air. Correction? For what? But the intercom ignored me, cutting into static as the lights dimmed for the second time. Not off this time, just pulsing like a heartbeat. Shadows crawling across the aisles, and somewhere deep in the stockroom a crash echoed, sharp and violent, something heavy falling hard enough to rattle the metal racks. I grabbed the flashlight, beam shaking, and stepped toward the hallway, calling out hoarse, "Booth?" expecting. Nothing but a voice answered. Not from the intercom, not from the speakers, but from the darkness itself. Soft, ragged, wrong. "Jake." The sound made every instinct scream to run, but I forced myself forward, one step at a time until I reached the edge of the stockroom door, flashlight beam slicing through damp cold air, and standing near the freezer door. Head tilted, forward breathing shallow was Booth, or what used to be Booth. His skin was pale, lips cracked, shirt clinging wet to his chest like he'd climbed out of a river, and his arms hung slack at his sides, fingers twitching faintly like independent insects. And when he raised his head, I saw his eyes reflecting, the flashlight like glass marbles. No recognition, no human focus, and yet his mouth moved slowly like pushing through mud. "It's awake." I swallowed hard, voice breaking. "What is?" "Booth." "What's awake?" But instead of answering, his hand trembled up to point at the floor, toward the hidden hatch leading down into the freezer chamber where the other me had been. And then he said something else, quiet but perfectly clear this time. "Don't break the sequence." I started to ask what that meant, but the entire room shuddered faintly, a vibration deep in the walls like machinery hidden behind concrete, and Booth's body jerked once, sharp, unnatural, as if someone pulled a string. Inside him, and he stumbled backward, hitting the metal shelf behind him, and for a second I thought he'd collapsed. But when I stepped closer, his head snapped up, mouth opening wider than it should, and a long broken sound tore out, half human, half static, words distorted but forcing their way through. "You shouldn't have woken him up." The freezer door behind Booth rattled violently like something massive slammed into it from the other side, dust raining down from the ceiling tiles, and I grabbed his arm, yelling, "Booth, we have to go," but his muscles locked stiff under my hand, every tendon straining like a cable about to snap. And before I could pull him, the door cameras on the monitors behind me began flashing, one after another, rapid, chaotic, showing frames not from outside but from here, from inside the store, from angles I didn't recognize. Dozens of overlapping feeds that shouldn't exist, and buried deep in one frame, almost hidden, was a short burst of text stamped faintly across the bottom. "Rules, Number 7 engaged." My chest tightened. I didn't remember a rule number 7, I hadn't seen it in the notebook, and I bolted back toward the counter, flipping the spiral open, pages flapping wildly as my fingers hunted for it. But when I found the spot, halfway down, the right page, the entire section where rule number 7 should have been, was scratched out, violently, deep grooves cutting through the paper like someone dug a knife into it, letters erased but the ghost of the ink bleeding faintly underneath, as though whoever had removed it didn't want me to read it. Not now, maybe not ever. I slammed the book down, grabbed the receipt the printer had spat earlier, and this time a new slip slid out on its own, words clean and brutal. Rule number 7, do not break sequence. My chest burned with 100 questions, but the freezer door slammed again, louder now, and from the speakers above the counter the same layered voice returned, louder, distorted, urgent. "Containment breach imminent. Prepare fallback node." The monitors glitched hard, flashing frames so fast my brain could barely process them. Snapshots of myself standing in different aisles, lying face down by the cooler, pressed against the glass door staring out. All time stamped the same. 03:57:44. Over and over, like the system couldn't decide which version of me belonged here. Booth groaned softly, collapsing to his knees, head low, murmuring something over and over like a mantra. "Too many awake, too many awake." And I reached down, shaking his shoulders, shouting, "Booth, tell me what's happening." He stopped, moving entirely, went stiff as stone, then turned his face just enough for me to see him smile faintly, wrong, lifeless, and whispered in a voice that wasn't his at all, "Sequence realignment begins now." The overhead lights cut in and out, cycling between full brightness and black void, and from somewhere inside the walls came a deep, grinding hum, heavy enough to make the soda bottles in aisle 2 vibrate, and every monitor snapped to one feed. The pod downstairs, glass cracked, fluid draining. The other me stepping out slow, pale feet wet against steel, head bowed, arms slack, moving like something testing a body it wasn't born into, and my knees nearly gave out, my voice breaking into a whisper. I didn't recognize. This isn't real. The intercom cut in sharply, cold and final. A single command issued in my exact voice. Unit 7, hold your position. But I didn't. I ran. The sound came first, not a ring, not a chime, just the low static hum of the camera system spinning up on its own like something had remote accessed the feed, and I turned toward the monitors just in time to see every screen flicker into the same frozen frame. The counter. This counter. Me slumped forward over the register with my forehead pressed against the lottery machine, a thin dark streak dripping down from my left temple to the floor, timestamp flashing 3:42:11. The same time I'd seen earlier, only this time, the frame didn't stay still. It tore like someone had grabbed the digital image by its edges and ripped it in half, and beneath it another frame appeared, same timestamp. But now I was lying on the tiles near the stockroom door, my arm bent backward wrong, legs twisted under me, eyes open, mouth parted like I'd been trying to say something, before it cut off. The monitor jumped again. New scenario, same timestamp. This time me sitting upright against the cooler doors, chest rising shallowly as something pale crouched over me, its long hands gripping my shoulders, head bent low as if whispering into. My neck and my throat locked as I reached for the console to shut the system down, but the power toggle wouldn't respond. Buttons stiff like glued plastic, and the fourth frame came, tearing through the others, the worst one yet. Me standing near the glass door, staring out at the parking lot, and behind me, reflected faintly in the door, someone else's face, not mine. Eyes blacked out like they'd been burned from the image, but the me in the recording didn't seem to notice. I stumbled backward, hitting the chip rack, bags rustling loudly in the silence. Heart pounding so loud it blurred the edges of sound, and then all four images layered into one across the grid, glitching in and out, like the system couldn't decide which death belonged to me, or maybe like someone was testing them, running simulations over and over until they found one they liked, and I whispered into the empty store, "Who's doing this to me?" But my voice sounded too loud, bounced wrong off the glass, and a sound from the stockroom answered me. A single low knock, then two slow drags of something heavy, then silence. I grabbed the flashlight from the counter, beam jittering across, aisle 2, toward the back hallway, forcing myself forward even though every part of me screamed to lock the front door and run. And the closer I got, the colder it felt, like stepping down into a cellar, air damp and metallic like a leaking freezer. And halfway down the hallway, the overhead bulb buzzed once, blew out, plunging me into pitch dark except for the thin flashlight beam. And in that split second of black before the backup kicked in, I saw a movement reflected in the convex mirror at the end of the hall. Something tall leaning just beyond the frame. But when the emergency light stuttered alive, the space was empty, except for stacked soda crates and the humming freezer door. I turned to head back when the intercom by the coffee station hissed alive with soft static, no one pressing the button, and then a voice broke through, faint but steady. "He's watching. Don't turn." And my chest went tight because it wasn't Marcy, wasn't me, wasn't anyone I recognized, and before I could ask who, the voice dropped into a wet rasp, glitching out mid-word. "Booth. Run." The feed cut instantly, dead silence returning, and I caught myself gripping the flashlight so hard the edges bit into my palm. Back at the counter, the receipt. Printer kicked on by itself again, rolling out a fresh slip, the smell of heated ink sharp as I grabbed it. And this one didn't print a rule. It printed a question. Who is inside? I stared at it until the words blurred, whispering, "What the hell does that mean?" And that's when I noticed something out of place. The rulebook was open on the counter where I'd left it closed, a fresh handwritten line filling in no, otherwise blank page halfway through. Rule number 4, if you see yourself in the stockroom, don't move. My stomach dropped cold and I turned slowly toward the live stockroom camera on the top right monitor, just in time to see the frame smear before locking into a new feed, showing the dark hallway I'd just left. And standing there perfectly, still under the dead bulb, was me, or something shaped exactly like me, shoulders slumped, head angled down like it was waiting. I blinked hard, backing away from the counter, and when my heel hit the tile edge, I turned toward the actual hallway and saw nothing. Just empty shadows stretching long. But when I looked back at the monitor, the other me was gone. Frame returning to normal, and before I could breathe, the bell above the front door chimed. Sharp, metallic once, then twice too quick, and I whipped my head toward the glass. Still locked, no one outside. But on the door camera feed, a figure was pressed against the pane, breath fogging the lens, and the angle of its head was wrong. Tilted so far sideways I could see the whites of its eyes even though the pupils faced down. And then the power cut out completely, store plunging into total black as the soda compressors died, and the silence went so deep I could hear my pulse. My breath, my teeth grinding. The generator kicked 3 seconds later. Lights dim but alive, and the cameras rebooted into a single unified feed, showing a grainy black and white shot of the counter from above. This counter, timestamp locked on 3:42. My body face down again, but this time something else was crouched beside me, its shape blurred by motion, hands pale and too many jointed, twisting at wrong angles, and its head snapped upward mid-frame like it knew I was watching. 2 black pits, where eyes should have been, and the entire feed tore sideways before cutting out. Somewhere in the stockroom, a metal rack crashed hard against the concrete, and I flinched so bad the flashlight slipped from my grip, clattering loud, beam spinning against the ceiling like a signal flare. And above me, the intercom came alive. One last time, this time crisp, no static, a man's voice cutting clean. He knows you can see him now. I stumbled back behind the counter, breathing hard, trying to find the panic switch again even though it hadn't worked last time. Flipping it anyway. Nothing. Dead. And that's when the printer clicked one more time, paper rolling out slow, and deliberate like someone was feeding it manually from somewhere else. And this slip had only 3 words on it, perfectly centered in bold. Prepare for replacement. The bell above the door chimed once more, and I forced myself to look up, to check the glass just to be sure. But the parking lot outside was empty, highway quiet, lamps buzzing faint in the distance, and then the register clock clicked forward from 3:41 to 3:42, and the monitor grid lit all at once. Every feed showing a different angle of me dying over and over, each death different, each inevitable. Like someone had been running the possibilities 1,000 times waiting to pick their favorite ending. And I whispered to no one, "Who's doing this to me?" And for the first time an answer came back from the ceiling speaker, soft, calm, female. "You are." The clock above the register glowed 3:03 a.m., its faint blue digits pulsing in rhythm with my heart, and I kept staring at the slip of receipt paper clenched in my hand. The 3 black words burned into my skull. Prepare for replacement. I whispered it under my breath like saying it out loud might make it less real, but the letters didn't change, and somewhere deep in the walls the soda compressor kicked back on with a low groan like the building itself had just exhaled. I forced myself to glance at the monitors, scanning each feed, and every frame looked normal again. The parking lot empty, the stockroom still, aisle lights steady. But the silence didn't feel like relief. It felt staged, like everything. In the store was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a mistake. And when the bell above the glass door chimed once, soft and polite, I nearly jumped out of my skin. The door camera feed showed nothing, just the smooth stretch of damp concrete under the yellow awning. But the bell chimed again, louder this time, and when I glanced at the actual glass, there were faint smudges of condensation forming slowly, one small breath cloud, then another, as if someone was standing just inches away on the other side even though the frame showed nothing. I swallowed hard, locked my knees against the urge to step forward and whispered, "I see you," though I wasn't sure if I meant it as a warning or a plea. The condensation cleared suddenly, fast, unnatural, and the bell fell silent, but before I could breathe, the intercom near the coffee station clicked alive and a voice came through soft, low my voice. "Don't look away." I froze, turning back toward the monitors, and the stockroom feed stuttered, glitched, then showed a frame that made my stomach pitch. The dark hallway lined with crates, the emergency light buzzing faintly, and me standing there at the far end, my double motionless head bowed, hands slack at its sides, the rule flashing through my head instantly. If you see yourself in the stockroom, don't move. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard the bones in my knuckles creaked, whispering under my breath, "Don't move, don't move, don't." And then the Jake on the screen twitched, head snapping up, not smooth but sudden. Sharp, like something fast-forwarded, and for the first time I saw its face properly. Eyes wrong, too wide, whites showing all the way around like stretched paper. Mouth slack but smiling faintly, and I stumbled backward into the lottery display, knocking over a stack of scratchers, and at that exact second the phone behind the counter buzzed, not ringing. Just a single flat click like someone had picked up on the other end, and a distorted voice filtered through, mechanical and glitched. "He's inside now." The hallway camera cut to black, but from somewhere deep behind the stockroom came a sound like metal dragging against concrete. Slow, deliberate, followed by 3 distinct knocks. Tap, 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 and then silence. I raised the flashlight toward the hallway, beam jittering across shelves stacked with energy drinks and old chip bags, forcing myself 1 step closer. And that's when the doorbell chimed again at the front. Louder than before, longer this time, stretching like someone leaning on it with their full weight, and my head snapped toward the glass door, expecting emptiness. But the parking lot camera now showed movement. A figure walking slowly into frame, wet footprints trailing behind him on the slick concrete, his shoulders hunched forward like gravity pressed harder on him than anyone else. And when the overhead light caught his face, my throat closed because it was Booth, the missing employee, his skin pale and sallow, hair plastered to his forehead, lips cracked, clothes the same uniform I'd seen in his ID photo but torn, filthy. And he walked up to the door without looking at the camera, without looking anywhere, just straight ahead until his forehead pressed against the glass hard enough to fog it instantly. I stepped forward before I could think, half reaching for the key, but froze when I saw his hands. Fingers bent wrong, knuckles swollen, nails cracked and jagged, something black under them like tar. His mouth opened slightly, slow and stiff, and when he spoke, his voice didn't carry through the glass but through the ceiling speaker above the counter. "Let me in, Jake." My stomach turned to ice, my voice breaking as I stammered, "Booth, what happened to you?" But his reply didn't come from him anymore. The monitor next to the door camera feed glitched once, then displayed a grainy close-up of his face. Lips parted, whispering something on loop, distorted but clear enough to catch on the 4th repeat. "Don't play the game." The bell above the door chimed twice fast, cutting him off, and suddenly the intercom cracked alive again. Another voice layered over static, low, unfamiliar, urgent. "Jake, knock back." I froze, the words tangling in my head. But before I could decide, Booth's pale hand lifted slowly, unnaturally slow, and tapped 3 times on the glass, loud enough to vibrate through the floor. Knock, knock, knock. My pulse hammered hard, every instinct screaming to back away, but my hand moved like it didn't belong to me. Reaching forward, and I tapped the glass back with my knuckles. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound stopped instantly. Booth lowered his hand. He leaned forward just enough that his breath smeared a perfect circle on the glass and whispered one last thing I couldn't hear, but felt deep in my skull, like pressure behind the ears, and then his body jerked once, violent, unnatural, and in the blink of an eye he was gone. Frame empty, lot empty, only the faint, wet footprints leading off the concrete into darkness, vanishing halfway toward the pumps like he'd evaporated mid-step. I stumbled backward, chest heaving, clutching the counter for balance when the receipt printer started spitting out a strip of paper nonstop, longer and longer, spilling across the floor like a white ribbon until the roll finally jammed with a sharp beep, and I bent to read the top line, my vision blurring as I made out the letters. Sequence initiated. Do not leave your station. At that exact moment, the lights above me dimmed, flickered once, and every single monitor synced into one feed showing the front door again. But now a different figure stood outside, still, silent, taller than Booth, body thin and angular like someone stretched a human shape over the wrong frame, head tilted slightly forward. And the strange part was the glass didn't reflect it. There was no shadow, no breath, no heat signature, just absence in the shape of a man. And before I could move, before I could even blink, the bell chimed one long, sharp tone that felt more like an alarm than a door sensor, and the intercom speaker cut in again with a final, flat command delivered in my own voice. "Don't move, he's already behind you." The sound came like a breath against my ear, low and sharp, cutting clean through the static hum of the cameras, and I froze behind the counter, gripping the edge so hard the laminate cracked under my fingers, forcing my eyes to focus on the monitors above me, scanning frame by frame. But the tall shape from the door camera was gone now, the parking lot empty, awning lights buzzing faint and steady, the damp concrete bare except for the faintest wet footprints Booth had left behind before, vanishing, and I would have believed myself safe if not for the soft, deliberate sound behind me, deep in the hallway. Tap. Tap my drag like someone moving barefoot down tile. Slow, patient, certain, and I spun with the flashlight beam slicing the shadows, heart beating hard enough to shake the light in my grip. But the hallway stretched out empty, only the faint hum of the stockroom freezers until the intercom above the coffee station clicked alive on its own, and Booth's distorted voice whispered, "Don't look inside," and then cut into static so harsh it rattled the metal frame of the lottery machine. I swallowed down bile, stepped out from behind the counter, moving slow toward the stockroom, each step louder than it should have been, echoing off the narrow walls until I reached the end of the hallway where the employee door waited, closed, but a soft light spilled out from beneath it like frost melting at the edges, cold mist curling across the floor, and I hesitated with my hand on the handle whispering, "Don't do it." But some part of me needed to know, some stupid primal urge to see what had been left here, so I pushed the door open, and the cold hit me like walking into deep water, breath fogging instantly. As I stepped inside, the room lined with metal racks stacked floor to ceiling with boxes of snacks and crates of expired soda. But my focus locked on the far wall where a rectangular hatch hung open, leading down into a steep concrete stairwell lit by a pale blue glow. Faint condensation dripping along the frame, and my gut screamed to leave it closed, but my feet were already moving, boots heavy against cold steps, hands sliding along damp railing until I reached the bottom where a single reinforced door stood, an electronic lock flickering faint green, door half ajar. I pushed gently, hinges groaning, and stepped inside a chamber lined with steel panels, the sound of refrigeration humming steady, breath loud in my ears, and in the center of the room sat a glass cylinder about 7 feet tall, cables running. From its base into the floor, pale mist curling off it, and inside the cylinder, suspended in faint blue fluid, was me, my lungs locked, frozen mid-inhale, staring at my own face under the rippling distortion of liquid, chest rising and falling faintly, eyes closed but twitching beneath lids like a dreamer caught mid-nightmare. And I whispered hoarse, "No, no, no, no," stepping closer until my breath fogged the glass, reaching up without thinking to touch it. But the instant my fingers grazed the cold surface, the lights above me flickered hard, a stutter sharp enough to throw my reflection into fragments, and behind me the chamber door slammed shut with a sound like bone breaking, echoing deep in the steel room. I spun, flashlight shaking wildly, but the handle didn't budge, locked from the outside, and the intercom speaker mounted above the cylinder clicked alive with a faint hiss before a voice came through, low, mechanical, unfamiliar. "Unit 7. Confirmed. Awaiting sequence alignment." I backed against the glass instinctively, whispering, "Unit 7? What are you talking about?" But the voice ignored me, repeating the same phrase before going silent, leaving only the hum of coolant, systems, and the faint sound of my breathing ricocheting against the walls. I turned back to the pod, pressing my palm against the glass, and that's when the cylinder light shifted from blue to faint red, subtle but wrong, and the monitors above flickered on, showing not the pod, not the room, but the live door camera. Upstairs, where the front glass doors stood wide open now, swaying slightly like someone had forced them against the lock, and faint footprints, wet, deep, wrong, led in from the darkness into the aisles. But the feeds didn't show who or what made them. Only the shelves shaking slightly like something massive brushed past. My chest tightened until breath burned, heart hammering so loud I didn't hear the low sound at first, not until it became deliberate. Tap, 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 3 knuckles knocking on glass right in front of me, and I jerked my gaze down to the pod where the other me had lifted one pale hand, tapping his knuckles softly against the inside surface. Slow, rhythmic, as condensation bloomed around his fingers, and I whispered, "No, you stay asleep. You..." But the receipt printer upstairs suddenly kicked on hard, so loud I could hear it over the refrigeration units, paper spilling non-stop, and then a mechanical voice came faintly through the overhead speakers. "Rule number 6, if the other you opens his eyes, run." My throat tightened as I turned back to the pod, forcing myself to look, forcing myself to believe the eyes were still closed. But then the eyelids twitched once, subtle, and I stepped back, boots scraping the damp concrete, whispering, "Stay. Asleep, stay asleep, stay." And the second pair of eyes snapped open. It wasn't my gaze, not exactly. Pupils too large, irises wrong, holding a depth like falling into a well too deep to climb back out of. And the thing inside the glass smiled faintly, lips curling slow, deliberate, and for the first time I realized it wasn't breathing anymore. The cylinder lights flared red, an alarm I couldn't hear vibrating through the floor as the lock on the hatch above clicked open, and I bolted up the stairs without thinking, slamming the door behind me just as the sound of hissing pressure filled the chamber below, and I barely made it into the stockroom when the freezer door rattled violently like something heavy slammed against it from inside, hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling tiles. I ran for the counter, breath ripping at my throat, but when I reached the monitors, the live door feed showed the tall shape outside again. Same thin frame, same wrong tilt of the head, but now there were two of them, one standing perfectly still at the glass and another further back in the parking lot, bent low over the concrete like it was watching something crawl beneath the surface. The bell above the door chimed twice, sharp, and every light in the store cut out at once, plunging me into perfect black where the only sound was the faint creak of floor tiles bending under weight that wasn't mine. And from somewhere behind, the counter, deep and quiet and far too close, a voice whispered in my ear exactly in my own tone. "You shouldn't have woken him up." The air inside the store felt heavier than before, like the oxygen itself had thickened into something wet and electric. Every sound muted under a pressure I couldn't explain, and I stood frozen in front of the counter, staring at the other me standing in the stockroom doorway, his head tilted forward slightly, bare feet dripping onto the tiles, hands hanging slack but twitching faintly like small independent machines, and neither of us moved for what felt like forever until the ceiling speakers cracked alive with a faint static hiss before Node S4's cold voice filled the room, calm and steady like announcing a verdict. "Unit 7, prepare for validation." The receipt printer behind me clicked sharply, spitting out a single slip, and my stomach clenched when I read the black words printed clean across it. "Rule number 12, kill the false one." My breath caught in my throat, pulse hammering loud enough I could hear it in my ears, and I looked up slowly at the other me as he lifted his head, pupils blown wide and wrong, lips curling into the faintest trace of a smile that didn't belong to me, and in my own voice, perfect and steady, he whispered, "Don't trust them, Jake, I'm you." My grip on the flashlight trembled, every muscle in my body screaming to move, but I stayed frozen as the monitors above me synced into one feed, a live view of the parking lot outside where the silhouettes I'd seen before were now closer, dozens of them standing in perfect formation under the buzzing yellow lamps, all facing the store, motionless, waiting. And Node S4 spoke again, louder this time, sharper, almost urgent. "Validation protocol engaged. One leaves." I stepped back, instinctively hitting the counter edge hard, and Booth's broken voice came from the hallway to my right, weak but deliberate. "Jake, listen, whatever you do, don't follow the rules. Not now, they're lies, all of them." His warning was cut short as the lights flickered violently, and a violent surge of static drowned him out, the intercom snapping to a flat mechanical tone, words layered and wrong. "Booth corrupted, asset obsolete." I turned, shouting his name, but his body jerked violently like something inside him locked up, collapsing against the metal shelf. And before I could move toward him, the other Jake stepped closer, bare feet silent on the tiles, eyes locked on mine, and whispered again in my own voice, "I woke up first, Jake. That means I'm the original." My chest locked, brain spinning wild, whispering back hoarse, "That's not how this works." But the receipt printer shrieked again, spitting out another slip with new words burned deep. Thread 0 override, original confirmed upon elimination. My stomach turned to ice. One of us had to die for node S4 to confirm the original. The other Jake tilted his head at the paper, faint smile stretching wider as if he'd read it too. And in the same moment, the monitors above us fractured into 12 separate feeds, each showing a different possible outcome. One where I killed him, one where he killed me, one where neither of us survived, and another where both of us stood frozen while the figures outside pushed through the glass, breaking the lock entirely, tearing us apart before the feed cut to black and the timestamp. Across all 12 screens read the same thing, 04:11:59, less than 3 minutes from now. The ceiling speaker cracked alive again, Node S4's voice sharp and cold. "Choose, Unit 7. Failure to comply results in termination of all threads." My hands shook violently, flashlight slipping from my grip and clattering against the tiles, and I raised both palms toward the other me, whispering, "We don't have to play their game." But he shook his head, slow, deliberate, and whispered back, "You don't get it, Jake. There's no game. There's just the one that stays." And before I could reply, he lunged forward faster than I thought possible, grabbing the edge of the counter and vaulting across it, knocking me to the floor hard, breath knocked out of my chest as we rolled, my fingers clawing at his wrists trying to force him off, but his strength was wrong. Heavier, stronger, like the body didn't care if it broke itself to kill me. And over us the speakers screamed a low tone as the bell above the glass door began ringing steadily once per second like a countdown, each chime louder than the last until I shoved my knee up hard, forcing him off me, scrambling to my feet as he stumbled back into the lottery rack, knocking tickets to the floor like confetti. Booth groaned faintly from the hallway, his voice ragged, desperate. "Jake, the power breaker. Reset the breaker." I bolted toward the panel near the stockroom entrance, ripping the cover open with trembling hands, slamming the main switch down hard, and the entire store went black instantly, cutting power to the lights, the cameras, the speakers, but not to Node S4. Its voice came from everywhere at once now, louder than before, layered, fractured, dozens of tones stacked on top of each other like a chorus tearing reality in half. Thread alignment unstable. Initiate total purge. The fog outside swallowed the parking lot completely, pressing hard against the glass until it was opaque, and through the thick gray, I saw the faintest outlines moving closer, dozens of them, all Jake-shaped, converging, on the store. The other me lunged from the darkness, hitting me hard enough to send us both into the shelves, glass bottles shattering around us as cold soda flooded the floor under my knees, and I grabbed a broken shard, holding it up between us as his eyes locked onto mine, and he whispered, perfectly calm, perfectly still, "If you kill me, you'll find out you're not the real one." My breath caught, chest heaving, and somewhere deep in the store a loud metal snap echoed sharp and final as the front doors unlocked on their own, swinging wide as the silhouettes outside surged forward, stepping in perfect synchronization across the threshold. Dozens of me staring back at me with blank, pale faces. Node S4's voice roared over the static, final, commanding, "Validate, now." I turned toward the other Jake, his face inches from mine, sweat mixing with the broken glass at our knees, and I screamed, "Which one of us is real?" But before either of us could move, Booth's broken voice rasped from the dark, trembling and raw, whispering the last thing I ever heard him say. "Jake, there isn't one." The lights blazed white-hot for a single blinding second, and every monitor synced into a single impossible frame. Me standing outside among the silhouettes, head tilted, lips parted, eyes empty, timestamp frozen at 04:12:1, and then everything went black. The darkness didn't stay still. It felt alive, breathing with me, and I gripped the counter edge so tight the wood dug splinters deep into my palm as the bell above the front door gave one long, low chime that didn't sound like a chime at all but like metal groaning under weight, and the glass doors trembled slightly, vibrating against their frames even though the air inside the store was perfectly still. And behind me, the receipt printer clicked softly, spitting out a small slip of paper I didn't want to touch but couldn't stop myself from grabbing, and when I read the words, my breath froze. Thread 0 active. I didn't know what it meant, but the ceiling speakers came alive instantly. Node S4's cold synthetic voice cutting sharp through the silence. Calm, steady, final. Unit 7 acknowledged. Original alignment failed. Thread 0 engaged. Every monitor blinked once and then all 12 feeds synced to the same view. A massive chamber somewhere far larger than anything under this store, lined with hundreds of pods stacked floor to ceiling. Pale light flooding the glass, and in every single pod was me, floating in faint blue fluid. Eyes closed, skin pale, motionless except for the tiniest twitch beneath the lids. My chest locked, whispering without breath. This isn't possible. But then the camera panned on its own across the chamber toward a raised platform, and standing there under the harsh light was Booth, or what was left of him. Half his face shadowed, one eye pure black, jaw trembling as if his mouth was fighting against itself. And the moment the lens caught him, he turned his head slowly toward the camera like he could see me watching, and his voice came through the intercom, raw and ragged. "Jake, you need to listen. You were never the first." My knees weakened, one hand slamming against the register to stay upright, and I shouted hoarse, "Tell me what that means." But Booth just shook his head, twitching like a puppet on tangled strings, before forcing out another sentence like every word cost him pain. "Project Helix doesn't create you, Jake. It copies you." I froze, breath tearing, my throat dry as glass, and before I could even process it, the monitor shifted violently again, cycling through frames too fast for my brain to catch. Me in different aisles, bleeding, running, dying, hundreds of variations in a storm of impossible possibilities, before stopping on one impossible still image. A version of me standing outside in the fog with the other silhouettes, head tilted, pupils gone, skin pale, timestamp flashing 04 on 07/19. Less than 10 minutes from now. I stepped back instinctively, whispering, "No, that's not me, that's not going to happen." But Node S4's voice cut through, calm and merciless. Thread integrity failing. Initiating merge protocol. Suddenly, the entire store groaned, as if the foundation shifted beneath it. Ceiling tiles trembling, soda bottles rattling hard against metal shelves, and I turned toward the hallway as the emergency light above the stockroom began pulsing violently. Each flash faster than the last, casting long, stuttering shadows along the walls, and from somewhere deep inside the freezer chamber below came the sharp hiss of hydraulics releasing, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps, bare, wet, steady, climbing the steel stairs. I backed up until my spine hit the counter, breathing ragged flashlight beam darting between the monitors and the hallway, and that's when Booth staggered into view again, his silhouette filling the doorway, his breathing shallow and sharp, like someone dragging broken glass through his lungs, and he held something in his trembling hand. The small black rulebook, torn, damp, smeared with faint streaks of something dark. And when he spoke, his voice cracked like two frequencies overlapped. "You need to see Rule 11, Jake, but you can't trust it." My throat locked, whispering hoarse, "What do you mean?" And he tossed the rulebook across the tiles, landing at my feet. Pages splayed open, and I picked it up, flipping to the latest entry, and froze when I saw it. Rule number 11 written neatly in bold ink. Stay inside the store. Do not leave under any circumstance. But when I blinked, the words changed on the page, the ink bleeding into something else entirely. Leave immediately. Do not hesitate. I flipped the page over, thinking I'd misread, but the handwriting shifted again, lines melting across the paper until the new message burned deep. Kill the other you before 0407. My hands shook violently, the book slipping from my fingers, and I looked up at Booth wide-eyed, yelling, "What the hell is this? Which one is real?" He shook his head, pale and broken, whispering back, "That's the point. Node S4 doesn't want you to know." The intercom above us exploded with static so loud I dropped to my knees, hands clamped over my ears until the sound cut sharply into cold silence, and the synthetic voice returned, lower this time, slower, like savoring every word. Alignment, breach confirmed, termination protocol enabled. At that exact moment, the lights went dead again, every bulb bursting in a shower of sparks, plunging the entire store into perfect black. and the hum of the freezers stopped completely, replaced by the slow creak of the stockroom door opening on its own. I turned, breath hitching hard, flashlight shaking as I raised it toward the hall, and the beam caught a glimpse of something stepping out from the shadows, bare feet leaving wet prints on the tile, head tilted forward, hands hanging limp at its sides, and even before the light hit its face, I knew it was me. The other Jake lifted his head slowly, unnaturally smooth, pupils dilated wide, a faint grin spreading across his face as he whispered in my exact voice, quiet, but carrying, sharp in the silence. One of us doesn't belong here. The receipt printer behind me clicked loudly, ejecting one last strip of paper that fluttered to the floor. And when I glanced down, the words burned black into the slip. Thread 0 determines the original. And for the first time since this began, I understood something terrible. I might not be the real Jake at all. The buzzing came first, low and uneven, vibrating up through the tiles like the store itself was breathing wrong. And I looked up from the counter just as all 12 monitors glitched violently, the feeds tearing apart into fragments of static before reforming into dozens of overlapping frames, impossible perspectives folding over one another until my vision blurred trying to make sense of it. And then the chaos stopped abruptly, each screen locking onto the same single image. Me, but not me, strapped to a chair somewhere I didn't recognize, harsh white light cutting sharp shadows across my face, my eyes open but blank like I was watching something I couldn't see. And stamped across the bottom of every frame in bright red letters were 2 words: thread failed. I stumbled back against the lottery rack, my hand knocking over stacks of tickets as the receipt printer shrieked to life, spitting out a long stream of paper that curled across the floor, black letters burning deep into the page. Node S4. Initiating sequence purge. My throat tightened, my voice cracking out without meaning to. Purge what? But the intercom above the counter clicked on with a short burst of static and answered in that same calm, synthetic voice from before. Perfectly even, emotionless, deleting failed iterations, I spun toward the cameras just in time to see the monitors shift again, replacing the chair image with something far worse. Dozens of pods like the one in the freezer below, lined in rows in some vast space I'd never seen, liquid draining from. Half of them as limp versions of me inside sagged forward, eyes rolling back as faint alarms pulsed over the feed, and one by one the screen over each pod dimmed as a soft mechanical hiss bled through the speakers. Unit offline. Unit offline. Unit offline. My stomach twisted cold, lungs tightening until I could barely breathe, and I whispered without air, "Those aren't me. Those aren't..." But my own voice on the intercom cut me off, flat, perfect. They are. I clutched the edge of the counter hard enough to splinter laminate under my nails, staring at the shifting grids as more Jakes appeared and disappeared, some panicked, some still, some screaming into cameras I couldn't hear, until the final surviving feed zoomed on one version of me standing perfectly still in an aisle just like this one, head tilted, mouth moving soundlessly, and then that frame shattered into static too, replaced by bright red letters across all 12 monitors. 11 threads terminated. My knees nearly gave out, heat draining from my body, and before I could think, the hallway camera behind me clicked alive on its own, flickering faintly as it showed Booth standing in the stockroom doorway again, breathing uneven, his shoulders twitching like his body didn't fit right anymore, and I stumbled toward him whispering, "Booth, talk to me, tell me what's happening." And this time he looked up, eyes dark and glassy, voice rasping rough like old tape. "I told you not to wake him, Jake. You weren't supposed to see any of this." I grabbed his arms, shaking hard, yelling, "What is Node S4? What the hell is happening here?" And his lips parted like he was about to answer. But before he could speak, the lights flickered violently above us, and the intercom voice cut in, overriding him entirely. Calm, final. Unit Booth compromised. Remove asset. The stockroom. Lights exploded with a pop of sparks, plunging the hall into near darkness, and Booth groaned, collapsing to his knees, clutching his head. And when he raised his face again, his voice wasn't his voice anymore. Layered, Wrong, like something inside him was speaking through him now. I'm not him anymore. My chest seized cold, pulse roaring in my ears, but before I could react, the freezer door behind him rattled violently, and the alarm tone I didn't even know existed in the store system began pulsing low and slow from the ceiling speakers. Beep, beep, beep. A warning heartbeat, and every monitor blinked at once, flashing a new rule in thick black letters. Rule number 9, do not follow the wrong U. But before I could even process it, the other cameras contradicted it, some showing Rule 9, leave your station immediately, others showing Rule number 9, do not look behind you. I stumbled backward, shaking my head, whispering, which one is real, which one is real? And the synthetic voice answered through the intercom instantly. Too fast, too rehearsed, all of them. That's when the store changed. Every monitor, every bulb, every speaker synced into one deafening hum, static pressing hard in my skull, and on the parking lot camera the fog outside thickened fast, swallowing the distant lamps until only the closest halo remained. And through that shifting mist I saw movement, silhouettes stepping forward from the edge, dozens of them, their shapes jittering unnaturally between frames like the cameras couldn't track them properly. Some tall, some bent, some crawling, but all of them turning their faces toward the glass doors in perfect unison. And a chill broke through me as I realized their faces weren't faces at all. They were mine. Dozens of me. Each one different, in tiny ways. Hair, shirt, bloodied or clean, but all with the same hollow stare locked on me. The bell above the door gave one single sharp chime and fell silent. And in the reflection of the glass I saw something worse. Another me standing inside the store now. Just behind the lottery rack. Not moving. Not breathing. Head tilted slightly, forward like waiting for me to notice, and when I turned fast and wild, there was nothing there, just empty air. But the receipt printer behind me screamed to life again, paper rolling fast, too fast, until it spilled off the counter onto the floor, and the letters on it made my breath catch in my throat. Thread. Alignment incomplete. Replacement pending. Somewhere in the silence a voice whispered softly, directly against my ear. Quiet and calm, but carrying all the weight of certainty in it. You're already not you anymore. The store was silent, too silent, the kind where sound itself feels crushed down into the floor, and I stood behind the counter gripping the edge so tight, the laminate cracked beneath my nails while the receipt printer beside me spat out its fourth slip in less than 5 minutes, each one blank except for a single black line centered in the middle. Node S4 online. I didn't know what it meant, but I hated it instantly. The weight of the letter sinking into my chest like wet concrete. And when I reached for the slip, the cameras above me glitched in unison, all 12 feeds cutting to black. And for 3 full seconds, the entire system stayed dead before they blinked back one by one, showing angles I didn't recognize. Hallways with walls the wrong color, stockrooms too big, freezers stacked with pods like the one downstairs. Only there were dozens of them, each one holding another me suspended in pale liquid, motionless, waiting. And the timestamp on every feed read 03:57:44 over and over, the same way it had in the impossible frames before, like the system couldn't agree on which death belonged to me. Or maybe it didn't matter. Maybe all of them did. I whispered, "What are you doing to me?" Without meaning to, and the intercom above the lottery machine clicked alive with a soft hiss before a new voice, one I hadn't heard before, calm and measured like reading instructions aloud. Node S4 sequence. Control active, Unit 7 detected, status unstable. I froze, jaw clenched, whispering under my breath, "Stop calling me that." But the voice didn't stop, continuing smoothly. Helix protocol enforced, aligning alternate threads. At the same time, the receipt printer beside me screamed, to life again, spitting out a fresh slip in bold ink. Unit 7, non-compliant. I ripped the paper in half without thinking, my chest hammering so hard I barely noticed the faint static bleeding into the ceiling speakers, until a familiar sound cracked through. Booth's voice, distorted and raw, whispering my name over and over, but layered strangely. Multiple Booths speaking at once in slightly different tones, like versions of him stacked on top of each other. And then they all spoke in unison. perfectly synchronized. "It isn't you they want, Jake. It's the one that wakes up," I spun, scanning the stockroom hallway with the flashlight beam trembling hard in my hand. Backing up against the counter as the freezer door behind the employee shelves began rattling violently, the sound deep and rhythmic like something inside, hitting the metal deliberately, and then it stopped just like that, replaced by a faint wet hiss from the vents above me. I turned toward the cameras again, forcing myself to breathe steady. But this time the feeds didn't show the store. They showed me, or rather, dozens of me, from dozens of different camera angles, different outfits, different positions, some versions of me bloodied, others standing still with their heads tilted blank-eyed, all of them frozen mid-frame except one, Jake, near the center of the grid, slowly turning his head toward the camera and lifting his hand as if waving at me directly, and my stomach dropped cold because the angle he was filmed from wasn't anywhere in this building. I whispered hoarse, "Where are you?" And the speakers above me answered immediately. Same calm, synthetic voice as before. "Node S4 active. Thread 12 breach detected." Then the lights above aisle 2 flickered violently, buzzing so loud it sounded like bees trapped in the walls, and Booth's voice returned over the intercom. Panicked this time, fast, stuttering, almost human again. "Jake, listen to me. Don't look at the screens, don't listen to him, he's not—" Static tore through the feed mid-word, cutting him off, and in the silence that followed, the receipt printer clicked once more, paper sliding out with deliberate slowness, black letters burned deep into the slip. "Rule number 8, if the exit opens, don't trust it." My chest tightened, throat closing on dry air, and I turned instinctively to glance at the glass doors at the front of the store, just as the magnetic locks disengaged with a faint electric pop, handles trembling slightly as if inviting me. And outside, across the empty parking lot under the buzzing yellow lamps, I saw movement. Dozens of faint silhouettes, all standing perfectly still in the fog, spaced evenly apart like chess pieces, facing the store, unmoving. The bell above the door didn't chime, but the locks clicked again and the right-hand door drifted open an inch on its own. Slow, deliberate, and cold air bled in across the tiles. I stepped forward without thinking, feet carrying me halfway before something on the right monitor stopped me dead. The stockroom camera, live feed, showing Booth standing in the center of the hall looking straight into the lens. His eyes wrong, now black from edge to edge, his skin pale enough to reflect the emergency light and his jaw trembling like he was forcing words past something heavy in his throat, until finally he rasped out one broken sentence. "Don't leave your station." The bell above the door chimed hard this time, loud, sharp, like it wanted me to ignore him, like the building itself was trying to pull me forward, and behind me the freezer door downstairs slammed so hard it shook, dust loose from the ceiling, and I turned just as the cameras froze one last time, all 12 feeds cutting to the same impossible frame. Me, not now but soon, standing outside in the fog shoulder to shoulder with all those silent silhouettes, my head tilted the same way theirs were, and the timestamp burned bright across the bottom. 04/133. The store lights flickered violently, buzzing sharp and uneven like angry hornets trapped inside the walls, and I pressed myself flat against the counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white, forcing my eyes up at the 12 monitors above me just as they synchronized for the first time since the chaos began. Every feed showing the same black screen, a faint blinking cursor in the top left corner like an old command prompt, and then words began to type across every display in perfect unison. Project Helix, Node S4 initiated. My stomach dropped cold and I whispered under my breath, "What do you want from me?" But before I could breathe, the system answered with sharp synthetic precision, my own voice speaking back to me through the ceiling speakers, flawless, emotionless. Unit 7 detected, original iteration unstable, preparing replacement. The receipt printer screamed to life, paper curling fast, black ink burning through each line. Thread alignment required. My chest constricted, heartbeat pounding uneven in my throat, and when I turned to the hallway, the stockroom camera flared suddenly on the far right monitor, and standing there was Booth, drenched in sweat, shirt torn, face pale under the emergency lights, and when he stepped into the doorway I saw his hands trembling violently, fingers twitching as though something inside him was fighting for control. I ran toward him, flashlight beam shaking wild across the tiles, yelling, "Booth, tell me what's happening." But his eyes were black now, glassy, reflecting the beam with no human focus left, and his mouth moved slowly, rasping a sentence, like tearing metal. "This isn't the first time, Jake, and it's never been the first time." My chest burned, throat tight, but before I could reply, the intercom above us clicked alive with that same cold voice. "Unit Booth corrupted. Initiate purge." Booth convulsed suddenly, body locking stiff, choking on his breath, and I grabbed his arms trying to hold him up, but his muscles fought against mine like someone else was controlling him, his jaw stretching unnaturally as a voice poured through his throat that wasn't his own, low and layered and wrong. "He knows now, end this one." I staggered back against the shelf just as the hallway lights exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging us into darkness, and somewhere deep in the freezer below came a low, mechanical rumble, a vibration heavy enough to make the soda bottles on aisle 2 rattle in their cases. The monitors above me all changed at once, static clearing to reveal dozens of live feeds of me in different aisles, different moments, some bleeding, some staring blankly, some screaming silently into cameras, and overlaid across every single feed in bright red letters, "Replacement pending." My pulse roared in my ears, my breath catching as the intercom voice spoke again. Calm, precise. "Unit 7, prepare for deletion." I slammed the counter, yelling hoarse, "I'm not a unit, I'm not..." But then the hallway camera froze on one impossible frame. Me standing in the stockroom doorway right next to Booth, except I was here, behind the counter, shaking, breathing, alive. And when I blinked, the me on screen tilted its head at an unnatural angle, slow and deliberate, lips curling into the faintest smile, and then the feed went black. I stumbled back, knees weak, whispering, "That's not me," when the receipt printer clicked hard, spitting out a fresh slip with one single line. "Rule number 10, one gets out." My throat locked. It wasn't a warning this time. It was a choice. One gets out. The bell above the door chimed once, sharp, clean, and I turned slowly toward the front glass where the locks disengaged with a faint electric pop. Doors sliding open a fraction as cold mist spilled in from the lot, and outside in the fog I saw them again. The silhouettes, dozens, maybe more, each frozen, each watching. And this time I understood. They weren't just standing there, they were waiting for someone to join them. The intercom cut alive again, but it wasn't the synthetic voice this time. It was Booth's, quiet, almost lucid, whispering like a prayer. "Don't pick him, Jake. Don't pick the wrong you." The lights above me dimmed hard, pulsing slow, and suddenly all 12 monitors synced to a single live feed. The freezer chamber below, the broken pod spilling pale fluid across the steel floor, and the other me, the one I'd seen sleeping inside, now standing barefoot in the middle of the room, head low, hands twitching slightly. And then his face lifted toward the camera slowly, deliberately, locking eyes with me through the feed like he could see, me watching him, and his lips moved, shaping words without sound until the intercom translated them in my exact voice. "One of us leaves." My chest seized cold, feet rooted to the tiles, and before I could react, the power in the store died completely, plunging everything into black so absolute I couldn't even see my own hands. But the sound filled the void instantly. The bell, above the glass door, ringing soft and steady. Once, twice, 3 times. And then a voice, whispering inches from the back of my neck in my own voice. Quiet, deliberate, final. "Choose right, or neither of us gets out." I took the job because it sounded simple enough. Work the overnight shift at a quiet convenience store off Route 6, keep the coffee hot, watch the cameras, and make sure the doors stayed locked after midnight. But from the moment I stepped into the place, something felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. The air colder than it should have been for September. The hum of the old soda machines buzzing low and uneven like static under my skin. And behind the counter, an older woman named Marcy was finishing up her shift, packing receipts into a drawer, while her tired eyes kept flicking toward the glass doors like she was waiting for something she didn't want to see. And when I asked if everything was okay, she hesitated before answering. "Read the rulebook," sliding a small black notebook across the counter toward me. Her nails chipped, knuckles pale, the pages dog-eared like it had been handled hundreds of times. I laughed softly, thinking she was joking, but she didn't smile, just said flatly, "Don't lose it and don't question it," before grabbing her bag and leaving without another word, the bell above the door chiming once behind her, soft, but sharp in the silence that followed. I opened the notebook expecting cleaning schedules or register instructions, but instead the first page hit me with bold block letters scrawled in black ink. Rule number 1, don't open the door for someone. "Who looks like you?" I frowned, flipping through the other pages quickly, seeing more rules but most of them scratched out. Messy lines cutting through entire sentences as though someone had tried to erase them violently, leaving only fragments I couldn't fully piece together, and I set the book down, shaking my head, muttering to myself, "All right, weird joke, whatever," before turning my attention to the counter and checking the register balance. The store was quiet for the first hour. Nothing but the buzz of the freezer units and the occasional creak of the ceiling tiles settling, until around 1:27 a.m. when the chime above the door went off once, soft but distinct, and I glanced up instinctively, even though the glass door was locked like Marcy told me to keep it, and the parking lot outside was empty except for the single buzzing street lamp throwing its yellow glow across the damp concrete. But the chime hadn't lied. It only rings when the motion sensor picks up something close, and I felt the hairs rise on the back of my neck, glancing back at the monitors above the counter where 12 grainy black and white camera feeds showed the aisles, the stockroom hallway, and the view out front. And that's when I froze. On the door camera feed at the very edge of the frame, there was the faintest shadow, a human shape, standing perfectly still just outside the glass where the light didn't reach, not moving, not breathing, nothing but a vague silhouette barely visible, and my chest tightened as I leaned forward to focus on the screen when suddenly the image glitched, static ripping across it, and for a single split-second frame I thought I saw a face, my own face, staring directly into the lens before. The feed corrected itself, showing nothing there. Empty concrete stretching smooth under the awning. I blinked hard, whispering to myself, "Just the light, just a glitch, calm down." But my pulse was already hammering, ears filled with my own breathing as I forced myself to look away, grabbing the mop handle behind the counter like it would make any difference if someone tried to get in. 10 minutes passed, maybe more, and just as I started convincing myself I imagined it, the store phone rang, sharp and loud against the silence, making me nearly drop the mop. And when I picked it up, there was nothing but static on the line, harsh and uneven like an old radio between stations, until a voice finally cut through, soft, low, broken like it came from underwater. "Don't open." And then the line went dead. I set the receiver down slowly, my hands damp, when the receipt printer behind me chirped to life on its own, spitting out a small strip of paper without me touching anything, and I turned, pulling it free, my stomach clenching when I read the 3 black words printed perfectly in the center, "Don't turn around." My breath caught instantly, lungs refusing to move as every muscle in my body locked, and I stood frozen for what felt like minutes, the weight of the silence pressing in around me, until I finally spun, fast, heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. But there was nothing there, just the narrow aisle stretching past shelves of dusty snacks, the soda cooler humming low, and the stockroom door at the far end closed tight. I laughed once, short and broken, shaking my head as I crumpled the receipt into my pocket, telling myself, "This is fine, it's fine," and then glanced back at the monitors to reassure myself, but the instant my eyes hit the screen, my stomach dropped. On the live feed of the parking lot camera, I saw myself standing outside under the flickering street lamp, staring up at the store, motionless, my own face pale under the buzzing light, and before I could move the chime above the glass, door went off again, soft but deliberate, and the silhouette outside took one slow step forward,